I spent 3 years hating someone who never actually hurt me. Let me say that again because it took me just as long to admit it. I spent 3 years, 1,095 days, building a villain out of someone who was just trying to survive me. Her name was Rachel, and I told myself for longer than I cared to admit that she was the reason my life fell apart. It started the way these things always do. Quietly, with small cracks you don't notice until the whole foundation gives out. We met at work. One of those corporate jobs where everyone smiles too much and no one really means it. She was new to the team, confident in that way that makes you either want to befriend someone or compete with them. I chose the latter, though I didn't realize it at the time. Rachel was good, really good. The kind of person who didn't just meet deadlines, she made them look easy. She'd walk into meetings with ideas I'd been trying to articulate for months, except she said them better, clearer, like she'd been thinking about them longer, even though she'd only been there 6 weeks. And people noticed. Our boss noticed. My colleagues noticed. I noticed, but I told myself I didn't care. Except I did. I cared in the kind of way that eats at you from the inside. The kind that makes you refresh your email obsessively, checking if she got CC'd on something you weren't. The kind that makes you rewrite sentences 5 times before sending them, just to sound half as articulate as she did without trying. I told myself it was about fairness. I'd been there 3 years. I'd put in the work. I deserved the recognition she was getting. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to look, it wasn't about fairness at all. It was about fear. Fear that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Fear that all those hours I'd poured into this job didn't matter if someone could just walk in and do it better. Fear that maybe, just maybe, I'd been coasting and now someone was holding up a mirror I didn't want to see. The breaking point came during a project pitch that we were both presenting ideas to the client, a big account, the kind that could lead to a promotion. I'd spent 2 weeks on my pitch. Late nights, revisions. I even practiced in front of my bathroom mirror like some kind of TED Talk wannabe. Rachel's pitch was simpler, cleaner, and when the client's face lit up halfway through her presentation, I felt something cold slide down my spine. She got the project. I smiled, shook her hand, said all the right things, and then I went home and cried so hard I gave myself a headache. But here's the thing. I didn't cry because I lost. I cried because I convinced myself that losing meant I was worthless, that if I wasn't the best, I was nothing. That Rachel's success was somehow proof of my failure. Looking back now, I can see how twisted that was. But in the moment, it felt like the most logical thing in the world. So I started building the story where Rachel was the villain, where she was manipulative, calculated, stealing credit, and stepping on people to get ahead. I didn't say it out loud, not at first, but I let it simmer. I let it shape the way I saw her. When she'd offer to help me with something, I'd see it as condescension. When she'd compliment my work, I'd hear sarcasm. When she'd invite me to lunch with the team, I'd decline and tell myself she was trying to keep tabs on me. I rewrote every interaction to fit the narrative I needed. Because if Rachel was the bad guy, then I didn't have to face the uncomfortable truth that I was struggling and it had nothing to do with her. My work started slipping, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Deadlines I used to hit easily suddenly felt impossible. Ideas that used to flow dried up. I'd sit at my desk, staring at a blank screen, feeling like a fraud. And I blamed her. I blamed her for making me feel small, for making me doubt myself, for being everything I thought I was supposed to be. The real turning point came on a random Tuesday. Rachel and I ended up alone in the break room. One of those awkward moments where you both reach for the coffee pot at the same time and have to decide whether to make small talk or pretend the other person doesn't exist. I was about to do the latter when she said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" I braced myself. This was it. She was going to gloat, or worse, offer me some patronizing advice. But instead, she said, "Do you hate me?" The question hit me like a slap. What? No. Why would you? Because you look at me like I killed your dog, she said, and there was no malice in her voice. Just exhaustion. And I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry. I thought we could be friends. I stood there holding my empty coffee mug, and I didn't know what to say. Because the truth, the real, ugly truth, was that she hadn't done anything. She hadn't sabotaged me, hadn't stolen credit, hadn't whispered about me behind my back or tried to push me out. She'd just been good at her job, and I'd punished her for it. I wish I could tell you I apologized right then, that I broke down and confessed everything and we hug it out like some kind of Hallmark movie. But I didn't. I mumbled something about being stressed and walked away. And for the next 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on her face. Not angry, not even hurt, just tired, like she'd been carrying the weight of my resentment for months and didn't understand why. That's when it started to crack, the story I'd been telling myself. I started replaying moments. The time she'd offered to help me prep for a presentation and I'd snapped at her. The time she'd complimented my work in a meeting and I'd responded with a cold thanks. The time she'd invited me to her birthday drinks and I'd lied about being busy. Every memory felt like a tiny shard of glass, cutting into the narrative I'd built. Because the more I looked at it honestly, the more I realized Rachel wasn't the villain in my story. I was. That realization didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one harder to swallow than the last. I was the one who'd turn a colleague into an enemy. I was the one who'd let jealousy poison every interaction. I was the one who'd chosen resentment over growth, blame over accountability. And the worst part? She tried. She tried to connect, to collaborate, to build something good between us. And I'd shut her down every single time. I'd spent 3 years waiting for her to fail so I could feel better about myself. 3 years hoping she'd stumble so I could stop feeling so inadequate. 3 years making her responsible for emotions that had nothing to do with her. The truth tasted bitter, like something you know is medicine but still makes you want to spit it out. I wasn't the victim of some toxic coworker. I was the toxic coworker. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I asked her to coffee. She said yes, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. And I didn't blame her. We sat in a cafe 2 blocks from the office, and I told her everything. Not the sanitized version. Not the half apology that shifts blame. The real version. The one where I admitted I'd been jealous, insecure, and unfair. The one where I owned the fact that I'd made her working life harder for no reason other than my own bruised ego. I didn't expect forgiveness. Honestly, I didn't think I deserved it. But Rachel listened. And when I was done, she said something I'll never forget. I get it. I've been you before. That's when I cried. Right there in the cafe, ugly tears and everything. Because she didn't owe me understanding. She didn't owe me grace. But she gave it to me anyway. We didn't become best friends overnight. But we became colleagues who respected each other, who could work together without the weight of unspoken resentment hanging between us. And slowly, something else shifted too. I stopped seeing her success as my failure. I stopped keeping score. I started asking for help when I needed it. Started celebrating wins, mine and hers, without that bitter aftertaste. I started doing the actual work of getting better, instead of just resenting people who already were. It sounds simple when I say it like that, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn, that sometimes the person standing in your way is you. Not the coworker who's doing well. Not the boss who doesn't recognize you. Not the world that feels unfair. You, your fear, your ego, your refusal to look in the mirror and admit that maybe, just maybe, you're the one who needs to change. Here's the thing they don't tell you about being the villain in someone else's story. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you're human. Flawed. Capable of hurting people without meaning to. Capable of making mistakes that ripple out further than you realize. But it also means you're capable of something else. Change. Real change. The kind that requires you to sit with your own discomfort and admit that you were wrong. The kind that asks you to apologize without expecting anything in return. The kind that forces you to grow even when it's painful. I think about that version of me sometimes. The one who spent 3 years building a villain out of a coworker who was just trying to do her job. The one who couldn't separate someone else's success from her own worth. And I feel sorry for her. Not in a pitying way, but in a compassionate one. Because she was drowning. And instead of learning to swim, she was trying to pull someone else under. Rachel left the company about a year after that conversation. She got an offer she couldn't refuse, better title, better pay, a role that was perfect for her. I was genuinely happy for her, and I told her so. On her last day, she stopped by my desk with a card. Inside, she'd written, "Thanks for being brave. Enough to change." It meant more than you know. I keep that card in my desk drawer. On days when I'm struggling, when I'm tempted to slip back into old patterns of comparison and resentment, I take it out and read it because it reminds me that growth isn't a straight line. It's messy and uncomfortable and sometimes humiliating, but it's also possible. You could be the reason something broke and still be the reason it gets better. You can be the villain in one chapter and the hero in the next. You can look back at the person you were and feel grateful you're not them anymore. I'm not going to pretend I have it all figured out now. I still have moments where jealousy creeps in, where someone's success feels like a judgment on my own, where I have to actively remind myself that there's enough room for all of us to do well. But the difference is, I catch it now. I recognize the pattern, and instead of building a story around it, I sit with the discomfort and ask myself the hard questions. Why does this bother me? What am I actually afraid of? What do I need to work on? And most importantly, is this about them or is this about me? 9 times out of 10, it's about me. And that's okay, because at least now I'm looking in the right direction. The hardest lesson I've ever learned is this: you can't change your life by changing other people. You can't fix your insecurity by tearing someone else down. You can't heal your wounds by inflicting them on someone who never hurt you. You can't grow by staying small and hoping everyone else stays small too. The only person you can change is yourself. And that's terrifying, because it means taking responsibility for the parts of your life you don't like. It means admitting that sometimes the thing holding you back isn't bad luck or unfair circumstances or toxic people. It's you, your choices, your reactions, your refusal to do the uncomfortable work of becoming better. But here's the beautiful part. If you're the reason things are hard, you're also the reason things can get easier. You have that power. You've always had it. You just have to be brave enough to use it. So here's what I want you to take from this. If you're holding onto a grudge, ask yourself why. If you're blaming someone for how you feel, ask yourself if that's really fair. If you're waiting for someone to fail so you can feel better about yourself, ask yourself what that says about where you are. And if you realize you've been the villain in someone else's story, if you've been the reason someone's life was harder, or their work was more stressful, or their day was a little darker, then be brave enough to own it.